Welcome to this press conference with a fact-finding mission on Venezuela on the occasion of the launch of their second report, which is now available online. The embargo on the report has therefore been lifted. The report comes in two parts. It's a shorter 20-page report and a 200-page document containing the detailed findings of the mission. Additionally, we have shared with you a press release in English and Spanish and a fact sheet to help steer you through the key sections in the report. So we are joined today by all three members of the fact-finding mission. Chairperson Marta Valiñas and member Francisco Cox-Vial will make introductory remarks, giving an overview of the report's findings, followed by questions and answers with you. The mission's newest member, Patricia Tapata, who was appointed earlier this month, will be observing today's press conference. She was not involved in the preparation of the report and therefore will not take questions. All of their bios are available on the mission's website. And if I may simply recall that the fact-finding mission has a mandate to investigate gross violations of human rights, including extrajudicial executions, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, torture, and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment, including those involving sexual and gender-based violence committed since 2014, and to help combat impunity and ensure accountability for perpetrators and justice for victims. The mission is also mandated to report back to the Human Rights Council, which originally established the fact-finding mission back in September 2019 and extended its mandate the following year for an additional 2 years up until September 2022. The fact-finding mission will present today's report to the Human Rights Council next week on Friday, 24 September. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Senora Valiñas for her opening remarks, to be followed by Senor Cox-Vial. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Rolando. And a warm welcome to all the journalists who are attending this press conference and everyone who is watching us online. From October 2020 to August 2021, the first year of its second mandate, the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela has focused on investigating and analyzing more in depth the responses of the Venezuelan justice system to the violations of human rights and crimes committed in Venezuela since 2014. Our analysis is focused more specifically on the responses of the justice system to the violations and crimes committed against men and women who are opponents or critics of the government, or perceived by the government as such. These include increasingly individuals and or organizations that document, denounce, or attempt to address human rights or social and economic problems in the country, or individuals that interfere or are perceived to interfere with interests of government actors, whether political, economic, or criminal. Some of these violations were documented during the mission's first mandate and included in its first report, while others were documented over the past year. These violations include arbitrary detention, torture, including sexual violence, short-term enforced disappearance, and arbitrary deprivation of life. The mission conducted a detailed analysis of 183 cases where perceived or real opponents were detained. The mission also held 177 interviews, including with victims or family members, legal representatives, as well as with former judges and prosecutors who have worked in the Venezuelan justice system during the period of the mission's mandate. In addition, the mission gathered information from verified justice sector actors through 86 responses to a public questionnaire, and it conducted an extensive document review of thousands of pages of legal case files and other official documents. While the mission regrets that Venezuelan authorities refuse to respond to the mission's numerous requests for information or to grant it access for in-country investigations, the mission is fortunate to have access to information from within Venezuela, including the various sources mentioned, many of which are present in Venezuela and or worked in the Venezuelan justice system, as well as to the files of cases which originate from the Venezuelan justice system. Based on the investigations and analysis conducted, the mission has reasonable grounds to believe that instead of providing protection to victims of human rights violations and crimes, the Venezuelan justice system has played a significant role in the state's repression of government opponents. It has done so in three main ways, which we will elaborate further. Firstly, through the erosion of its independence. Secondly, by not advancing adequately or sufficiently the prosecution and sanctioning of those responsible for violations committed by other state actors, namely the security and intelligence actors and high-level public officials identified in the mission's first report. And thirdly, by committing or not acting upon procedural irregularities or other human rights violations which marred the cases analyzed by the mission. Our investigations reveal a justice system fraught with undue pressures, both from external political actors and from within the judicial and prosecutorial hierarchies, which compromise the independence of judges and prosecutors. For example, in 102 of the 183 cases examined, the mission recorded that high-level public officials made public statements commenting on criminal cases involving real or perceived opponents, either prior to or soon after their detention. In addition, most judges and prosecutors in the past years have been appointed provisionally and outside of the procedures established in the Constitution, rendering them vulnerable to undue interference in the way they carry out their functions and the decisions they make, and also subject to disciplinary and dismissal procedures which are not in line with constitutional guarantees. Moreover, according to sources from within these justice sector institutions, the appointment of judges and prosecutors over the past years has been increasingly influenced by political and personal considerations. Former judges and prosecutors interviewed reported that they and their family members had been subject to threat and intimidation. Nearly half of the former judges and prosecutors interviewed by the mission left Venezuela due to safety concerns. Our investigations equally reveal that the state is not taking tangible, concrete, and progressive steps to remedy violations, combat impunity, and provide redress to the victims through investigations and prosecutions. The state reported that in the period between 2014 and May 2021, in total, between 379 and 397 state officials were convicted for human rights violations. The limited availability of public information regarding prosecutions in these cases creates significant challenges in assessing the government's efforts to investigate and prosecute human rights violations. Nonetheless, in relation to the 19 cases included in the mission's 2020 report involving targeted repression against real or perceived opponents of the government, the mission reviewed the status of domestic investigations and proceedings, and in all but 3 of those cases, there was no information indicating any progress. In fact, 3 of the 5 cases presented this May by the chief prosecutor of Venezuela as emblematic cases in which there had been positive developments in the proceedings were also cases investigated by the mission, the cases of Fernando Alberto Alban, Rafaela Costa Arevalo, and Juan Pablo Pernalete. And the mission considers that the scope of investigations is either limited to less serious crimes, or only the lowest level perpetrators face criminal prosecution, or both. Several of those considered to be opponents of the government are detained and then held by intelligence agencies, the GINEBRA and SEBIN, at times for prolonged periods without charges, and sometimes in spite of judicial orders for their release. On 12th of May 2021, President Maduro adopted a decree ordering the transfer within 30 days of detainees in the GINEBRA and SEBIN custody to detention centers run by the Ministry of Penitentiary Services. However, according to the information available to the mission, 19 political prisoners remain in the GINEBRA facilities, and no transfers were made of detainees held by SEBIN after that date. These and other individuals perceived as opponents to the government are subjected to various and compounded violations, including arbitrary detention and torture, and also to due process irregularities, which we will now turn to.
We can unmute Mr. Cox, Vial. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead, Francisco.
Thank you. The mission has reasonable grounds to believe that frequent procedural irregularities are committed by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela's justice systems against real or perceived opponents. The mission's investigation of cases revealed that illegal detentions are a frequent occurrence, abusing the flagrante delito exception that allows an arrest without a judicial warrant. The mission also documented when arrest warrants were issued, discrepancies abounded in the case reviewed. Prosecutorial and judicial actors either played a direct role in these discrepancies, such as by backdating arrest warrants, or an indirect role by routinely including the inaccurate or deceptive arrest records in legal cases perpetrated during the arrest and detentions. Given the focus of the report, the mission paid particular attention to instances in which these allegations were raised with judicial authorities without effective response. In 113 of the 183 cases of detentions reviewed by the mission, detainees or their representatives have made allegations of torture, sexual violence, and or other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment perpetrated. In 67 of these, the detainees appeared in court with clear marks of mistreatments or raised allegations of torture, sexual violence, and or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment during court proceedings. Such allegations have also been raised by family members and legal representatives in written submissions to control courts, the public prosecutor's office, or the ombudsperson's office. In cases investigated, there is no indication of any action having been taken. The mission is also concerned that many of the detainees were handed back to the custody of agencies who allegedly had tortured them. Therefore, the mission calls upon judges to cease ordering pretrial detention in Sabina Licoide and Plaza Venezuela, and DGCIM's Boleita and Fuerte Tiuna, and ensure proper application of orders regarding the place of detention by law enforcement and intelligence bodies. The mission has also reasonable grounds to believe that prosecutors and judges played a key role in arbitrary arrests by sustaining arrest warrants, pretrial detention orders, and serious criminal charges based on facts and evidence that did not refer to criminal acts or individualize the defendant's participation in the crimes alleged. In some cases, prosecutors and judges sustained detention or charge based on evidence that was manipulated or fabricated, or even obtained under torture. This situation is seriously aggravated by the constant obstacles that judicial and prosecutorial actors put forward against defense lawyers to do their job. The mission reminds that the right to a legal defense is a cornerstone of due process. Some procedural irregularities previously mentioned amount to serious violations of due process of law, while others infringe on the personal integrity and liberty of defendants, among other human rights. Although the mission continues to investigate other human rights violations falling within its mandate, significant delays in recruitment staff members impeded its capacity to carry out in-depth investigation into violations outside the current area of focus to present to the Human Rights Council at its 48th session. For most of 1 year period between the 45th and 48th session, the mission operated with less than 1/3 of its intended capacity. The focus of the present report in no way minimizes cases involving extrajudicial killing, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, and torture, and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, including sexual and gender violence committed against other individuals in Venezuela. The mission continues to investigate rigorously these other violations and analyze criminal structures and chains of command of individual and institutional actors in Venezuela, and will provide further analysis and conclusions at the Human Rights Council session in March and September of 2022. Thank you very much.